Hi, I'm Larry Taylor. I'd like to share something that I'm deeply familiar with and wish I wasn't. And that something is suicide. On my 35th birthday, my son, my oldest son, who was 15 years old, called me at work and said that he had missed the bus to take him to school. We lived at the time out in the country. And I said, "Oh, well, it's no big deal." He had, because we lived in the country, he'd been driving for a year. We had an extra vehicle that was there on the property. I said, if you want to go to school, um, drive yourself down there. It's okay. I know he didn't have a license. And I also said, but if you don't want to go, take a day off because, you're a straight A student. Um, Studies come very easily to you. And Elliot said, okay, I love you, Dad. That was the last thing he ever said to me. I responded with, I love you, buddy. The last thing I ever said to him. A few hours later, I got a call at work. I worked about 30 minutes away from our home. And the phone call I got um, was from a neighbor. And the neighbor said, you have to come home right now, and hung up. I immediately called the house. The phone rang and a strange male voice answered, identifying himself as being a volunteer firefighter. I said, what's going on? I identified myself and said, what's going on? Can't give you any information. I yelled at him. I said, give me a break. I'm 30 minutes away. What is going on in my home? He said, all I can tell you, sir, very matter of fact, is we have one person down and you should come home right away. And this feeling of dread washed over me. And I went numb. And I told my coworkers very briefly that I had to leave and why. And during that 30-minute drive home, I was numb. I knew someone, I say I knew, I intuitively felt that a member of my immediate family was severely injured or sick. I thought it was perhaps my wife, Kathy, because you don't think of anything being wrong with kids. Turns out that Kathy wasn't even there at the time. She was attending a class in town. As I turned down the road that led to our little farm, there were multiple vehicles, lights flashing, emergency vehicles, fire engine, ambulance. and so on. Out in the road and in the driveway, lights all over the place. My dread and my numbness increased. If that's even possible. I pulled up. A young man opened the car door for me. And he said, "Your wife is in the ambulance." The ambulance back doors were open. My wife, Kathy, was seated on the gurney inside the ambulance. She was white as a sheet. She was as white as this door is behind me here in the video. And a senior paramedic who also happened to be a friend of ours was sitting next to her. I believe he was on her left side. He had his right arm around her shoulder and he was holding an oxygen mask over her face. I said something to the effect of, "Please, will somebody tell me what's going on?" The paramedic friend said, "No, I think Kathy spoke first." She said, "It's Elliot. He's dead." And I said, What happened?" Elliot had no history of mental illness, no history of depression. There was no drug usage. There was nothing in his life or in his background that anybody recognized as a red flag. As I mentioned, he was a straight A student. As I mentioned, he was, or perhaps I didn't mention, he had a steady girlfriend that he had given his class ring to. He'd skipped a couple years in school. He was a junior in high school. But he was mature in every way, and unless he told them, nobody knew that. I said, "What happened?" And the paramedic friend said, "He left a note." I was incredulous, shocked. Kathy had come home, felt like something was wrong. The screen door was just kind of banging back and forth in the breeze, not the way we would leave the house. She went in far enough to see Elliot lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her immediate thought was that he had been murdered. She jumped in her car and drove down to the corner store, which was owned by this paramedic that I mentioned a moment ago. She ran in and said, "Something terrible's happened to Elliot." Gene was the name of the paramedic. And Gene set off the volunteer firefighter alarm and ran next door, jumped in the ambulance, and sped out there. A flood of scriptures started coming to my mind. And then my attention shifted to the school bus. I think someone said the children, meaning our younger children, Our son Joshua was 8 years old. Our daughter Rachel was 11 years old, I believe. They said, your children had been dropped off at the neighbor's house. And someone said, maybe it was me, we need to go be with them. And someone drove us up there. Another one of the volunteer firefighters, I believe. And as I was getting out of the car, he looked at me with a brokenness and he said, I know what you're going through. We lost our little girl. We went in and told Joshua and Rachel what had happened, and they burst into tears, and the four of us held each other and sobbed and cried. And I remember Rachel asking, why? And I didn't have any answers. I still don't have any answers. And then began a lifetime of bereavement. I don't think you ever get over, especially the sudden, unexpected death of a child. I don't know that I would ever want to get over it. I share the story because perhaps you also have been through something tragic. Your situation, I know, isn't exactly like mine. No people are exactly the same. But maybe you've been through something that you can't figure out, you don't understand. Maybe it happened recently, maybe it happened a long time ago. But it still hurts. And part of you thinks, I should be over this. Part of you thinks there's something must be wrong with me because I'm not over this. I just want to say it's okay. We are broken people. Life doesn't just throw us curveballs. Sometimes life runs us over, grinds us down. I don't have answers. But a wise person told me, when you're confronted with things you don't understand, fall back on what you do understand. I don't have any idea why Elliot committed suicide. I don't understand. But I do understand that there is a God. And I understand that God is love. And that God will, no matter what you are going through or what you've been through, will never leave you or forsake you. This I know.